Good evening and welcome to the Monday, February 9, 2015 regular Board of Education meeting held on the night when it was actually scheduled as opposed to every other meeting that we've had for the last couple of weeks. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a couple of sets of minutes to vote on as a board. One is the January 7, 2015 special meeting, and that was the high school start time, as I recall, and the January 12, 2015 regular meeting. Is a motion to approve those minutes? Second? Second. Corrections, changes? I did have one correction on the January 12 set. When the legislators were here, I think I expressed that the board believed that using standardized tests on students for evaluations of teachers was not particularly well, was not called for, I think, as I don't remember exactly the words I used, but was not something that we supported. The minutes say that it would not be beneficial to have standardized tests for teachers. I agree with that too. However, I think that the point is that that this untried system that the state has got for having I think it's a quarter of the teacher evaluation be student performance on standardized tests is really not very well thought out, and not particularly when the test hasn't even been validated. So in any event, I think with that clarification, I don't have any other changes. Anybody else have any corrections? Okay. All in favor of the motions?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Public forum for topics on the board agenda or input on the budget. I see nobody coming forward. So the item 5 on the agenda, Dr. Balistraci is reviewing the bills.
Yes, so for January, expenditures for the month of January were $4,152,116.33. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of January were 51.82% of the budget as compared to 49.82% in the prior year. Current projections indicate at the moment that we will end the year with approximately $70,000 of unexpended and unencumbered funds. We will be discussing and voting on a budget transfer shortly. Briefly, categories, revenue. Revenue for January totals $7,919.20. and includes the Medicaid reimbursement of $6,343.60 for the special services line, tuition reimbursement of $1,500 for the tuition line, and $75.60 for a donation from Coca-Cola for building and teaching supplies. Salaries and employee benefits approximate the prior year. Purchase services, the budget expended is higher. Other than legal services, and we did have a number of contracts this year that we were negotiating. The variances are for the most part the result of timing. Tuition, outplacement tuition is higher than prior year, and again that will be addressed in the budget transfer. Supplies and materials expended lower this year, mostly due to individual variations in timing. The capital percent of the budget is higher than the prior year. There is a credit noticed as a result of reimbursement for the technology lease. And lastly, transportation is higher. We do have special ed transportation that has been an issue and will also be addressed. So the warrants, the warrants are submitting $2,162,071.80. This is something that we discussed and looked over specific warrants in the Operations Committee that was held just prior to this meeting, but I don't know if there's any further discussion now.
Are there any questions about those expenditures? Is that a motion to approve those expenditures?
It is a motion to approve.
Second? Second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And so at the we're now, what are we, 7 months into the fiscal year, and how are we looking for the end of the year in, recognizing that we still have a lot of time to go, and there's still
Right,
some...
so it looks like at the moment, the current projection is that we will be approximately 70,000, have approximately $70,000 in unexpended and unencumbered funds, and it is being watched closely.
Very close.
Okay. I think we should acknowledge that there were some very large unanticipated expenditures this year that the administration has really handled very, very capably. Both Ms. Trudeau and Mr. Bowden and Dr. Freeman have really addressed some very significant expenses without any kind of an untoward impact, if you will, I guess, on the instruction. And so I think we hope not to repeat that moving forward in the future, the unanticipated costs, that is to say. But we do hope, I think we should acknowledge that Ms. Trudeau and Mr. Bowden have really done an outstanding job trying to keep these expenses within the appropriated amount so that we continue to act within the budget.
Very much so, and thank you for recognizing that.
Communications, anybody get any communications? We've had a couple. I know Dr. Moore mentioned that you had some specific questions about budget issues that I think have been responded to. I continue to get emails on the start times, high school start time. What's our plan on that?
At this point, we're working on a couple items moving forward. I continue to be in contact with the community members who have initiated the conversation. I've continued to receive some updated study information from them. Mr. Bloss and I have meetings scheduled with representatives of all of our bargaining units in district so that we can talk to all of the employees and talk about any contractual impacts that this may have. And it was canceled because of weather in the Boston area today, but we are rescheduling a discussion with the District Management Council. They are a group that does efficiency studies, and they have some expertise in the area of transportation. They're very interested in talking with us, as our transportation isn't the run-of-the-mill squeezing more out of the bus contract. They're interested in the school start time question, and we are going to have a conversation with some of the folks in their office and ask them to present a proposal to work with us on generating more efficient bus runs around changing start times. Mrs. Hahn and I continue to work on a timeline that would also include community surveys, continued community conversations, and continued dissemination of the research and studies. So I hope to have that timeline for you at one of your upcoming meetings. With a couple targets, a timeline that would suggest work that could lead to essentially immediate changes for this September, and then a timeline that would suggest a longer conversational time with possible changes to happen in September of 16, and I hope to have two versions showing both of those. In the meantime, the meetings and the conversations I just noted continue anyway.
Okay, anybody have any other communications? Okay. Student reps, Dr. Freeman gave the student reps the night off given the weather conditions, so that was prudent and thoughtful. Item 8 on the agenda is the superintendent's report. What would you like to tell us?
Which will be very brief. I had planned on discussing weather cancellations. I can tell you that we've had 4 snow days to date. And in fact, the discussion that I thought to have, I thought would have a broader interest level than just what we broadcast here. I simply want to bring everyone's attention to the fact that the Our Direction newsletter that went out this last week for this month discusses how snow day decisions are made, how they're communicated, and I would encourage everyone to visit the website, look at the most recent edition of Our Direction, and it explains how we make the snow day decisions that have impacted the last 3 Mondays here in district.
You know, I thought that was a very helpful publication.
Yeah, it was good.
A lot goes into it. I guess I might have only noted a couple of other points, though, and that is, and having been a longtime resident of North Guilford, like Mr. Kazin, and now a resident of South Guilford, just because it's okay in South Guilford doesn't mean it's okay in North Guilford. It's really different.
Yes.
And you could get 6 inches of snow up there when it's drizzling in South Guilford. So the other is that, and I think people get this, I think that everybody understands it, but school buses are not SUVs, and they don't, they just don't drive the same as your, as your four-wheel drive, whatever, yeah, and so the call when it looked, yeah, I can get to work, yeah, maybe, but you're not driving with 40 kids on a non-four-wheel drive school bus, so we do have to be careful about that, so I think.
One thing I was looking for in that newsletter I didn't see is what time do you set your alarm for on that?
You wanted the specifics.
There's actually a local news station that has sent an invitation out to all the superintendents in the state. They want to be at my house at 4 o'clock in the morning to film the whole process. And they're just not welcome. So I thought I could write the process down, but I will not have a film crew in to document the process.
I'm sure your family appreciates
New
this
reality.
as well.
Wise decision. Mr. Kazin will sub for you on that, maybe.
I did see the superintendent of Worcester yesterday afternoon announcing their decision today. I could see why she chose the afternoon,
Yeah.
the day before business hours, yes.
That completes my report for the evening.
Okay. I think you should mention, though, now, since we're televised today, we've just had a really rough time the last couple of weeks with meetings, obviously, but we did have a meeting on Saturday of 9:30 to 1, whatever that is, and part of what was decided, and a lot of it had to do with the budget, but we did also have a vote on the International Baccalaureate program, so maybe you could just summarize that for.
I would be happy to summarize for the camera. Over the last year and a half at least, the high school staff here at Guilford High School has been exploring the opportunity of bringing an International Baccalaureate program, which would be considered a heightened curriculum similar to what AP Courses offers, to this high school. We've sent a number of teachers for training. High school staff have been out to visit a number of IB schools in Long Island. We've been sharing the information with you, the board. We asked Dr. Borland, as part of his time spent in district, to entertain the question of adding an International Baccalaureate program. And we had Dr. Holzschneider, the president of DePaul University, who came and spoke with this board and the high school staff about his experience. I can't tell you how grateful I know the high school staff and Mr. Macenti and I am that on Saturday the board approved for us to begin the formal application process to the International Baccalaureate World School Program, to begin the process of becoming an International Baccalaureate school in the Guilford Public Schools. This process will involve 2 more years of communicating with the community at large, preparing our staff here at the high school, but it will be just one more opportunity that we will be able to offer the students of Guilford High School to stretch, to challenge themselves. It will be one more way that we will use instruction to invite real effort on the part of our students, because we know that with real effort, students grow their ability and become more successful over time. So I'll take this opportunity to thank the board for approval of that process this Saturday. It was an exciting vote. I know that the high school staff is excited, and it's going to give us 2 years of work to, again, take another leap forward. It'll make us one of the first schools in Connecticut to embrace the International Baccalaureate program, and absolutely one of the first schools on the shoreline. There's nobody else in our area who offers this to their students. I'm excited to be part of this.
Mr. Bloss said this on Saturday, but for me, the most persuasive part of the whole process was the fact that it was driven by the high school staff. And, I mean, I don't know how many, we must have had close to 20 staff members.
Close to 20 staff members here Saturday morning.
On Saturday, and many of them spoke, department chairs from various departments spoke eloquently about why they thought it was a good thing for Guilford. So this was not a top-down thing where the superintendent or the board said, we want to do IB. It was very much bottom-up. The staff in the high school has been looking at this for a long time, something that they want to do, and that's exciting to me, to see how excited they are.
I think it's a great opportunity.
Well, I think I should note, though, in his absence, Dr. Myers is actually, if you talk about where the seed was planted, I think Dr. Myers actually had a lot to do with it, because
Well, I
I
remember
think
three and a half years ago at the interviews, right? I
Right.
mean, we asked you this question.
I was asked in my interview if I had experience and would I be part of bringing it to the community, but while the board had an interest in it, I agree with Dr. Moore, it was really the high school staff who picked that interest up.
No
and
question.
Did the legwork and the research and caught the bug to a degree that
I think
now
your answer
they
was,
want.
I'll need to look into that, right?
I'm sorry?
I think your answer in the interview was, I'll need to look into
I
that.
will need to look into that.
And I did, and
Three-year payoff.
and as Dr. Moore noted, though, that some of the statements by the faculty were very, very thoughtful, very eloquent. I've encouraged Dr. Freeman to arrange for a roundtable for GCTV to try to make sure those sentiments are communicated to the public, because those are the people that are on the front line, and they know more about the program, and I think are very thoughtful in the way they communicate the advantages of the program. So I'm sure that will happen.
I think we've already booked the studio time.
Excellent. All right, anything else from you, Dr. Freeman?
Nope, that completes my report, thank you.
Okay. 9.1 on the agenda, on the board agenda, there is a personnel item, ratify the resignation of David, well, yeah, there's two different ways to pronounce this. As the lawyers know, there's a famous U.S. Supreme Court case of this name. It's called Giglio is the way we pronounce it, but it's Giglio in any event. We are ratifying his resignation effective February 14, 2015. Is there a motion to approve the resignation?
What's the background of this?
He was a part-time assignment here, and he's been able to secure full-time work elsewhere.
And you've got a plan to cover this with?
Yes, already moving forward.
Okay.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 9.1 is to approve a donation of $2,891 from the Guilford High Lacrosse Club for a salary for an assistant coach. And there is an exhibit. Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Second?
I would be remiss to remind people that every year when we talk about possibly going to pay for play and charging kids to play in sports, this type of thing goes away if you start charging kids to play in sports. So I won't say anything more about that, other than all in favor of the motion.
Aye.
Opposed. And so you will thank them on behalf of the board.
all of you.
Right. 9.3 is to receive for possible action the ratification of the custodial contract. Mr. Kazin was on that committee, and I'd ask you if you could to just summarize what that contract looks like.
Yes, we had several negotiations over the course of the summer. Mr. Sands was on the committee for the board, and the administration, Dr. Freeman and Jason were present throughout. The highlights of the contract is it's a 2-year contract, so we've gone to a fiscal year calendar as well. It'll begin September 1, retroactive to September 1, but conclude June 30th, 2016. We've added a new category, substitute employees. They will not be part-time employees, but they are part of the bargaining unit, and they will not work more than 20 hours a week. We've added a high deductible health plan, as we're endeavoring to do with each unit and have done so far. We added language regarding snow removal, including a volunteer list and defining the work for snow removal as becoming overtime after working a regular shift of 8 hours if you were going to work that day in which there's only snow removal. And finally, the year 1 increase is 2.25%, the year 2 increase is 2.1%. That's the summary.
You have 2 copies in your packet, a clean copy as well as a copy with all tracked changes.
Okay.
So may I make a motion?
Mr. Sands, you're on the committee. Do you have anything else to add on this?
No, I think it was a long negotiation, but we got to the right place in the end.
Okay. Well, I certainly want to thank both of you for all the work you did. These these can be very time-intensive. As we found this year, we had, I think, and one of the things that this also helps to solve is that we are not in negotiations with everybody at the same time. So that's one advantage of having a 2-year contract. So, thank you both for serving on this negotiating committee. That's outstanding. So that's a motion to approve
It
the
is.
contract? Okay.
Second.
Second. Any other questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And that contract, I believe, has been approved by the bargaining.
It
It
has
has
been
been
ratified,
ratified by
yes.
the bargaining unit and is in
Okay.
front of Mr. Bloss for his signature.
Good.
Then I'll do it. 9.4 is, we've already done this. No.
We acted on that
Yes, we did
Saturday,
act on
yes.
that Saturday. That is to,
That
just
is
for the
correct.
record, it was to authorize the administration to apply to get some money back from the state or federal government, state,
State.
for technology upgrades. So hopefully that will happen. And then 9.5 then is, we talked in the Operations Committee about possible budget transfers. Do you want to present that?
Certainly. We are facing an over expenditure in the special education tuition line in the amount of $290,000. We've discussed this at our meetings the last couple of months, and it relates primarily to families moving into the district whose students have needs that we did not anticipate. So we were over in that line. We do, however, have funds available in 2 other budget categories. One is teacher salaries, and the reason for that is because there were a significant number of retirements at the end of the last school year after the budget was passed. So we found that teachers who had been with the district for a long time and were at the top of the salary scale were leaving, and we were, in some cases, replacing them with teachers with less experience, therefore less highly compensated. So we have funds available in that line, and we'd like to use $250,000 to cover the tuition shortage. The remaining $40,000 would be made up from workers' compensation. Again, when the budget was passed a year ago, we were using estimates for workers' compensation, and now as the year has unfolded, it has turned out that we've budgeted more in that line than we'll actually be using. So it's requested that we transfer $40,000 from workers' compensation and $250,000 from teacher salaries into the tuition line, total of $290,000.
Okay, that's a motion.
It is.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion, questions? All right, this happens almost every year.
Every year.
And so fortunately, we are still within the appropriated amounts and expect to be, and with good management forthcoming. So, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We should have meetings in snowstorms all the time. 9.6, receive for possible action the 2015-16 budget. I guess just to frame this a little bit, Dr. Freeman had presented us with a budget early January. We discussed it at the time of the presentation to a degree. We actually, the process was to say it was a little bit choppy this year compared to the way we usually like to do it, is an understatement because of the weather. And it seemed like every meeting that we had to do something about this was canceled or rescheduled or snowed out or iced out or well, always weather-related.
Yes.
We did, I think it's fair to note that we did have a long meeting on Saturday. We did have some members of the public here talking about some of the budgetary priorities, specifically relating to special education, and encouraging us to continue on the road that we are on in the special education program. And I think we all were very comfortable with the direction that we're heading in special education and hope that we really continue down that road. And I think we did have one other meeting at Adams where we also had opportunity for input. We did not, unfortunately, we were not able to meet with the principals in a separate meeting the way we usually do, but we have had some communications with them at other meetings, and I think actually there were several principals here on Saturday to offer views.
Tonight, too.
I'm sorry?
There's a couple here tonight. Too.
I understand. There are 3 here this evening, correct. So we have spent a lot of time talking about Dr. Freeman's proposals, and I think we all agree that that the proposal is a responsible, is a reasonable proposal. I think the board and the administration have an understanding about what our expectations are, and I think the administration has an understanding about what our interests are and what our goals are, and the community's goals, because that's obviously who we're here to represent. We have, Dr. Freeman's original proposal was for and I should let you maybe highlight a couple of the larger changes in the budget, but the original proposal was for a 2.64% increase. Why don't you just summarize maybe the top 2 or 3 changes from this year's budget to next year's proposed budget, at least in your original proposal?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Essentially, the theme for this budget was that it is a year to continue focus on the work that has been on our plate for the last several years. There are no wholly new initiatives in this budget. There are, however, some staffing changes. We are experiencing enrollment decreases, so there is some decrease in staffing at the elementary level, still maintaining what I would consider to be excellent class sizes. Class sizes at the elementary level in the high teens, but there are some staffing reductions at that level. There are some staffing investments. We're continuing to invest in special education with an increase of 1.5 teaching positions in special education. There's an increased staffing, a teaching position included at the high school level. While the financial impact is minimal, we are going to continue our work moving forward with the International Baccalaureate program this year. There's not a significant impact to the budget because of that. We are beginning to unpack the responses from Dr. Borland and the recommendations that Dr. Borland has made, and we are going to make a number of initial responses that, again, don't have a significant budgetary impact. One area of focus was at the administrative level. We had suggested not adding administrative positions to the budget, but as all of our administrators have been working harder and more, recognizing that by taking 4 of our 10-month administrative positions and stretching those across the full calendar year, changing to 12-month positions. In large part, that is in response to the increased workload that goes along with the added special education capacity that we've brought into district, and which is impacting all of our buildings, and the impact of the new teacher evaluation mandate that we take on fully this year for the first time. Essentially, those are the biggest areas of discretionary investment. We're also impacted, as we are every year, by non-discretionary cost increases. The cost of electricity is increasing. The cost of, our salaries are our single largest expense, and we have contracts with all of our bargaining groups. There are simply some non-discretionary cost impacts. In general, we consider it a budget that is frugal, but that continues to invest in the core instruction that happens in the school system.
Okay. We have talked at least at some of our meetings about some possible changes to Dr. Freeman's proposed budget, some increases and some decreases, frankly. And maybe I should start with the increases, I guess, just to make those clear. One is that our non-certified staff are in a pension plan that we need to make an annual contribution to in order to make sure that it's going to be funded adequately moving forward. And Mr. Sands has really done very good work going to the pension committee meetings, trying to make sure that we understand what's expected of us. And there is a little bit of a little bit of a difference of opinion, or has been, about what the appropriate contribution should be this year. I think, Dr. Freeman, you originally proposed a contribution of $330,000. After discussions with the pension committee and the First Selectman's office and the town finance director, it is anticipated that our outflow from that plan this year will actually be $385,000. So it does seem reasonable, and I think there's consensus that we should add to your budget proposal $55,000 so that we in fact maintain the level of funding where it is, that it doesn't get better.
Yes.
maybe, because we will, and I'll talk about that maybe in a second, but it's not going to get worse. So we are right now 88% funded, Mr. Sands, as I recall, and when this is something we do have to keep we have to keep a real eye on this. This is not something that we're going to let get to, where Illinois is or something like that. It's not that big a plan. There are a limited number of, a couple of hundred people in it, yeah. And this is now a closed plan. That's the good news, and it's also the bad news. Since it's a closed plan, you don't have new members coming in, but since it is a closed plan now, and we've gone to a defined benefit plan or defined contribution plan, this situation will not be presented where there's a question about whether we're fully funded or not fully funded. So I think there's consensus that we should add 55,000 there. Ms. Renner, you've been a strong proponent of the food service billing. Maybe you could just mention.
Certainly. In our budget for the past number of years, the Board of Ed has billed, in effect, the school lunch program, an overhead amount. And it makes sense in theory. I mean, certainly our custodians are working in the cafeteria, and we have administrative time being spent on things that relate to food service. But it puts the food service program it damages their financial operation. And we do have students, in effect, prepaying for their lunch because we're using the power lunch cards, where you pay ahead for a period of time. And we don't want to be in the position where we're using the cash that we receive on the power lunch accounts to pay current bills. So we felt that it was necessary to discontinue the practice of charging the lunch program, this overhead allocation that we've done every year. So we removed that item, had the effect of increasing our budget by $35,000.
Okay. I think there's general consensus on that as well. The third increase would be something relating to professional development. And Dr. Moore, this was your idea. Maybe you could talk about this.
Sure. Many of you are aware of the Borland report, which came at a time, we still haven't had a chance to meet with him in person, so we still haven't gotten all of the questions answered. But, one of the things that he did mention is that to make differentiation a reality, we do need to have some resources devoted to that. And there are a lot of things in the report that are recommended that I think can be done without a huge budgetary impact, and I think we're already moving to do many of those things, and I think that's fantastic. So the idea is just to put at least some money into the budget that is specifically targeted towards professional development in differentiation, which is an area that he highlighted as in need of resources that you can't just say you're going to differentiate. You have to really put time and effort and some money into that. And so it's a bit of an arbitrary number. It's a start for this year. I think over the next year, the discussion will develop more in terms of what resources might be required. But yes, I was an advocate of at least starting to put in some resources for that.
Okay. I think there's consensus about that as well. And I should note that although that would increase the professional development line by 10,000, there is more professional development money in the district, and some of that money will no doubt be used to further some of Dr. Borland's proposals on PD.
That is not the only investment in differentiation or quality instruction in the classroom. Exactly. It enhances the monies that were already budgeted. Yep.
All right. So the board is I think there's rough consensus that we should add actually $100,000 to your budget proposal, but there's always a but. We also are. No, I think not. I think that there is a consensus that there should be some reductions. There can reasonably be some reductions to your proposal that would not affect instruction in a negative way or the physical plant in a negative way. Maybe the easiest ones are. I think Ms. Trudeau has received some better estimates from the town and from, does Kerma do our workers' comp? Kerma does, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so they've given us some better information about our anticipated workers' comp premiums for next year, and I think Ms. Trudeau is comfortable in reducing the workers' compensation insurance line by $40,000.
Yes.
Right. And that's information we received after we put their initial draft together.
Right. The other one that I think is probably reasonably easy, although just because of the way we've done it. The budget, Dr. Freeman's budget for Guilford High School energy consumption actually has a rather large contingency number in it. And there's nothing wrong with the contingency number in itself, but there was a contingency number that was almost about 20%. On top of what we have been told by the engineers and the architect, a very conservative energy number. So you might want to have a big contingency if you've got an aggressive energy, anticipated energy number, or the other way around, but you can't do both. So that's what I think we are satisfied that the original proposal maybe overestimated the need for an energy contingency for Guilford High School, and I think that there was discussion about reducing it between your budget between $25,000 and $65,000. I think where we have landed on is a $30,000 reduction, and that could be done without I feel like I have to mention Andy Potocny, and because he would say at this point, remember, a budget's just an estimate. Now, we get that, but it's a reasonable estimate, and I think we're comfortable that would be an appropriate
We're
number.
confident that still leaves us with what we need in our first year in a new unknown building. Yes.
The third issue that I think probably is not particularly controversial or difficult is we have been approached by the town about sharing an umbrella technology administrator position. It's not an administrator in the sense of a certified administrator, as you would expect in a school setting, but an umbrella administrative, I guess czar is the right word these days, or something, right? Somebody to try to unify the information systems and oversee all of the town and Board of Ed information systems, rather than, right now it's a very fragmented system. The town has actually retained Bloom Shapiro to do a study on this particular issue. There are three possibilities. Bloom Shapiro might say, don't do anything differently. They might say, hire somebody to oversee administrative, or town and Board of Ed administrative information technology, or they may say something in the middle. And I think your original budget assumed that they were going to recommend a full-time position split equally between the town and the Board of Ed.
For a full calendar year.
Starting July 1st. That seems highly unlikely, and I think in consultation with the town, we think that number for the town tech position can be reduced by $30,000.
Agreed.
The last two items that we've discussed possible reductions to your budget are one, I'm sorry, did I miss one?
Yep. Custodians.
Oh, custodian, I'm sorry, that's actually the least controversial. I think that there is, I missed the custodian. Yeah, I think that the Dr. Freeman's original budget proposal had 2 new full-time custodians for the high school. I think in further discussion, one of the major points in the high school project that we emphasized with the building committee that we wanted, and that they actually have absolutely followed through on, is to try to make sure that the materials used in the construction of the new building are easy to maintain, easy to clean, that this isn't going to be like maintaining this building. Now, it's a little bigger, yes, but and balanced against that is that we absolutely recognize the need to take care of that building. One thing that we are not going to do is have that building go up and then watch it fall down because it wasn't being cared for. It is going to be cared for. This is a new custodial, we would propose doing a new custodial position for the high school above the current staffing, notwithstanding the fact that it ought to be easier to maintain in some respects than the current building. On the other hand, we don't ever want that building to get to the condition that this building is in. So, having said that, I think you, Dr. Freeman, and really the rest of the board are comfortable with reducing your proposal to add 2 custodians to 1 custodian. So that would be a net $70,000 reduction, which includes obviously benefits, pension contribution, and salary. So now I'm right. Now there's 2 more, right? Okay. The next to last possible area would be you've asked for it to change 4 administrators from a 10-month position to a 12-month position. There is some thought that really maybe we should do 2 of those this year, that 2 of them are a higher priority, and that 2 of them we should review and consider next year, depending on obviously the rest of the circumstances. I think that we all agree that it's not a bad thing to have all of these administrators to be full-time. On the other hand, we ought to maybe take it a step more slowly. Good arguments can be made not to do that, but I think that there are at least some views that we could reduce your proposal by $35,000 by phasing in 2 of the full-time administrative positions this year, and then reviewing the other 2 next year, with an anticipation that if it makes sense, if you're experienced with the 2 that we put in this year, I think this point has been made by Dr. Moore and Mr. Sands, that this is a heck of a lot cheaper than adding an administrator. Why? Because you're already paying, health benefits are already there, so you're getting an 8/10 more work out of, for half or 2/3 of the cost of a full-time administrator. Much more, I'm sorry, less than that, much less. So it is a very economically sensible thing to do. I think that at least we would like to maybe take it a little more slowly. And then the final place that we talked about is a possible, you've proposed increasing the site improvement line by $25,000. We are absolutely committed to maintaining the site improvement line and making sure that we can put as much into that as we can, again, so that we are able to maintain the property that we have. We did get some direction from the town that they are going to take some items out of what we had been planning to do next year and put them into a town bond, so that I think we're comfortable in reducing your proposal by $12,500. Now, none of these are major items, obviously. There's really, when you look at a budget of this nature, I know we say the same thing every year, but it's true, there's really not other than class sizes and programs, there's just not a lot of ways to cut large dollars out of this budget. But if the board accepted all of those proposals, that would be a reduction in Dr. Freeman's proposed budget of $217,500. So that the total would be, if all of those increases and decreases were accepted, the total would be $57,509. $509,517. $57,509,517, an increase of 2.49% if adopted. So, discussion, questions, thoughts, comments? Don't be shy. I mean, does this seem reasonable to you, Dr. Freeman?
Yeah, I'd be happy to start by saying that I appreciate the board's thoughtfulness on both the additions and the reductions. I would think that all of the reductions that have been discussed are matters of degree. They're all places where we are looking at our work and being thoughtful about the work moving forward. I would thank the board for the fact that all of these reductions continue to support the initiatives moving forward. I think that increasing our administrator work years to full years accomplishes a number of things, and I appreciate the fact that the board recognizes that we're trying to be creative with existing positions, that we're trying to build leadership and grow leadership locally within our own system, and that moving in the right direction doesn't have to happen all at once. And so I appreciate the board's support in growing 2 of those positions with the ability to grow 2 further in the next year. All of the other reductions fall into the area of continued improvement, and not necessarily as quickly as we'd like to see everything happen, and we understand that. The town has competing pressures. I have always appreciated this board's support in constantly moving this district forward. Again, I do not see this as a status quo budget. This budget continues to invest in learning in the classroom, and I appreciate the board's support in that.
Any other comments? Is
Well,
there?
I think one thing we should point out is that the board is interested in getting this pension thing correct. And as Mr. Bloss has pointed out, there are definitely different opinions between the actuaries and the pension committee and the town and the Board of Ed. But one of the things that we've considered as part of this budget is that in addition to the $55,000 increase in the contribution, we're also considering that in the event that there should be any money left over at the end of the year, that some portion, possibly half of that money, would be as an additional contribution to the pension to try and make up for some of the shortfall in the funding. Historically, in the last several budgets, we've had minor surpluses that we turned back to the town. In this case, this year, that remains to be seen whether that'll happen, but I think as a way of continuing to work on this pension problem, it's a good first step.
Yeah, there is a way, this is a manageable issue right now.
Yeah.
There's a way for it to become unmanageable, and that's to do nothing.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that that has been, there are plenty of people in government that have done exactly that when it comes to the public employee pensions. We're not going to do that.
Right.
And so we just need to keep an eye on it and be, and I think this is, it would be easy to not put this in, this $55,000 increase. It would be easy, but it would also be irresponsible not to include it. So I fully support that, and I fully support the thought that we will keep an eye at the end of the year on not just this year, at any year, that if there are unexpended funds, the administration, I said this at the Operations Committee meeting, but I'll say it here, the administration here understands that if there's $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 left over at the end of the year, that doesn't mean, wow, well, let's go out and spend on a bunch of things that the board didn't approve and the board didn't support. We've turned money back to the town every year for I don't know, since I can remember, and that applies also with the building projects. There is an ethic here that just because the town said you can spend up to a certain amount, that doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's a really good idea not to if you don't need to. And so that's applied in the operating budget, that's applied in bonding, and I think that's, that credibility that helps us moving forward when we say, look, this is what we need to keep moving the district in a positive direction. So I'm optimistic that with thought that we'll be able to address this in a very careful way without it becoming a big issue.
I agree that that's a responsible position for us to take, although not particularly exciting. But another area that I'd like to point out that's similar is the funding of the capital area, the site improvements line. We've worked very hard over the past 5 or 6 years to get that number to where it needs to be. And we've maintained that with this budget. We did reduce the amount that Dr. Freeman requested, but we've reduced it so that the budget line basically keeps up with inflation. So it's not a step backwards in any sense. I also think that the addition to the budget, and it's odd to think about increasing the budget and suggesting additional amounts, but we've done that in areas that we felt were responsible. And the increase related to this wonderful report that Dr. Borland provided to us, where we had him come in to try to help us meet what was a need that had been identified. And we're trying to find some ways, and there have been a lot of ways that have been already been addressed. But this is a way to try to keep that going into next year's budget. So I think that's a great thing to be doing, too.
One of the comments on Saturday, which I think is a very reasonable question, is that, there is a slight decline in the enrollment in the district, and yet the budget's going up. When you look at the actual line items, the personnel, which is by far our largest item, is increasing by less than 1%, which with negotiated increases of cost of living of 2.5–3% a year, represents a net decrease in staff. And I've actually been watching closely the class sizes at especially the elementary levels, and I think we maintain those. It's hard for me to watch LEAT, where my kids are going to school. I mean, there's going to be some cuts or attrition at least there. But I think we've been responsible in the personnel. The areas where things have gone up have been things like looking at the utilities for the anticipated new high school, and while that will be an efficient building, it will also be air-conditioned, which is something that the students have never experienced, and that there is an additional cost to that sort of stuff, which is, I think, well worth it in terms of providing a good educational environment. So I just wanted to point that out in terms of the enrollment.
Did we say the numbers? I think there's a net reduction of 5 full-time employee teacher positions and 2 paralegal positions in this year's budget. Is that accurate?
Paralegals work in your office.
There's a net reduction of 2.5 teaching positions in the district this year. There's a net reduction of 1.5 paraprofessional positions in the district this year, yes. So while we've reduced 5 at the classroom level, remember we're increasing 1.5 in special education and 1 at the high school, actually. But you're right, a net reduction of 2.5 teachers in the district this year, a net reduction of 1.5 paraprofessionals in the district this year in recognition of those changing enrollment numbers. And again, I'll note that it keeps class sizes at that elementary level and the high teens, which is an enviable place to be. Guilford has very favorable class sizes because we know that's important to the climate of the school, and we have no intention of allowing those numbers to escalate. We watch them carefully, and we staff reasonably for those numbers, maintaining what the community has become familiar with.
Other questions, other comments, thoughts?
The only other thing I wanted to bring up, and it's come up in various meetings, but I think it's worth repeating again, we have discussed earlier in this meeting the need to make a transfer for the tuition line, and that has been a challenge over many years, and yet because of the terrific work that's been done by the school administration, by Ginny Brown, to bring in and grow in-home programs for our kids who need special services, that out-of-placement tuition line would be much, much, much higher were those programs not in existence. And while it's not just a financial benefit, we have more and more kids being served in our district, in our community, not spending an hour and a half on buses to be brought to other institutions. As I think has been mentioned already, we did hear from 2 parents on Saturday who really encouraged us to continue to support the in-home programs and to continue to move in that direction.
No, the in-district, I mean, it's a better product for less money. And now, it was not easy to implement.
No.
There are all sorts of inertial reasons why programs develop the way they develop, and it's hard to get them moving in a different direction somehow. But Mrs. Brown and Dr. Freeman and the rest of the special education team, and regular teachers, regular classroom teachers too.
Principals and
we
classroom
talk a lot
teachers,
about the
yes.
special ed program, but really,
That's
it's
right.
not. They aren't 2 different programs.
That's right.
The district really embraced that. The faculty and the administrators really embraced it. And you look at you gave us some data about cost avoidance, if you will. I want to say it. If the curve had been moving, had kept moving in the same direction it was moving,
Hundreds of thousands
I
of
think it was
dollars.
actually like
That's
$1 million
right.
and change. So it has gone very much in the right direction financially, but also has gone very much in the right direction programmatically. So it's good from every perspective. So any other comments or other questions? Then is there a motion that we move forward to the Board of Finance a budget for the Board of Education for 2015-16 in the total amount of $57,509,517?
I'll move it.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
This was other than the snow, this was a really good process.
Agreed.
Yeah,
No,
it
I
was,
think we've had some fabulous conversations.
Yeah.
It was an excellent process, and I would note, including the community and the Board of Finance.
I was going to say, I was
That's
just going to
right.
say that. We met with them twice,
Yes.
right, and kind of kept them in touch in terms of what we're doing. It is a very, very careful, thoughtful, deliberate process, and I think has come out with a very a positive budget, both for students, parents, faculty, staff, but also for people that have to support the schools through taxes. It's a responsible budget. I should mention, by the way, I'm meeting where all of the district superintendents and chairs of the 12th Senate District are meeting with Senator Kennedy and the Senate Chair of the Education Committee, Gail Schlossberg, tomorrow. So if there are any things that you would like me to convey to them, other than what I know you want me to convey to them, I get that. But if there's anything else, just let me know. Shoot me an email. That's going to be at Baldwin, as a matter of fact.
That's great.
Yes, Baldwin's going to be hosting that tomorrow. Yes, it should be an interesting meeting.
Yeah, I think the primary message are two things. One is, remember us at budget time, right? I know there's some discussion that this year towns are not exempt from state budget cuts the way they have been in the past. We'll see what happens. The governor, I think it's next week that the governor announces a budget, proposes a budget. I think it's next week. But then the other thing, I think the message is just simple. Talk to us before you vote on an education bill, right? And it's not, right?
I mean, these things coming out of left field are just not helpful.
Yeah, so anyway, it's terrific that the meeting's happening anyway, so I'll report back on that next month. Okay, item 10, committee reports. Policy Committee,
Policy Committee is meeting at the end of this month, so we don't have a report at this time.
Operations Committee,
We've covered
talked about it. Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment Committee, we did meet on Saturday. We actually had a long meeting. Dr. Moore, do you want to just summarize what we talked about?
I mean, I think most of it was IB, and that was addressed a little bit earlier. I mean, International Baccalaureate is certainly a big part of some of the instructional initiatives we've been discussing. So we spent a good, at least close to the hour of that meeting.
Did you
I think
circle
we actually,
the agenda? Yes.
yeah, we had, 9 items on the agenda. I think we made it to number 3. There were some handouts actually that got pushed a little bit. One of them, you may actually want to comment on this, is the testing schedule, which I know was an issue for parents last year, and the interesting thing with the Smarter Balance is that, it's over a wider period of time, but actually the amount of testing time that it takes, I believe you told us, is going to be less than what we expected with CMT and CAP.
Exactly. So we did share a testing window calendar with the Board of Education, and that's exactly the right observation. So even though at any one school it may look as if there are multiple weeks of testing, that is the window within which the testing may occur. And any individual student will never be testing for all of that window, and on no given day will any student be testing for a significant portion of the day. The students will take their tests, their assessments within those windows, and the total amount of time, in fact, is less than the time that had been previously assessed with the CMT or the CAPT. It's also worth noting that at the high school level, the assessments, while they are now delivered to 11th graders, there is no student who is currently enrolled in AP classes who will take any of the Smarter Balance assessments until all of their AP assessments are completed. So again, even though there is a testing window, we will first administer all of the AP examinations, and only when a student has completed all of their scheduled AP examinations does that student begin his or her Smarter Balanced assessment window.
That was a draft. When do you expect to let the parents know what the actual?
Well, each school is going to be putting out their own individual, really specific, these are the days, these are the grade levels, because, for example, at Baldwin, they may be doing 5th grade at a different time than they're doing 6th grade. At the high school, as Dr. Freeman mentioned, there are 3 weeks of testing, but they're actually just going to test about 80 students at a time. So in week 1, there will be a team of 80, and in week 2, there will be a second team. And then in week 3, it will be a third team of 80. A lot has to do with the technology also, and we don't want to over-test or overburden the students by, dragging it out. So each school will be posting for their parents and on their website more specific information. But another thing that parents may be interested in knowing is that no assessment is going to start until after spring break. We're not going to do, for Smarter Balance. There is for grades 5, 8, and 10, the capped science test will happen in March, which is typical of what it has for years and years and years. So for students with severe cognitive disabilities, they are going to complete their assessments prior to spring break. But the Smarter Balance assessment, the one that in English language arts and mathematics that is getting the most attention, won't even begin until after we return from spring break.
It's also worth noting at the high school that in the past, the capped assessment would impact instructional time at all 4 grade levels.
Right.
So that we would have students in all 4 grades that would lose instructional time. Because of the flexibility in administering the Smarter Balanced assessment, that no longer needs to occur. So while the 11th graders will be giving time to the assessment, less time that they had given to capped in the past, there will be no impact on the 9th, 10th, or 12th graders and their instructional time at the school. So the new system really does allow us to capture instructional time that we had previously been investing into the assessment.
And everyone has been saying less time than capped. This is estimated time.
Yes.
This is an untimed test. So that students aren't going to sit there and say start and stop with a watch, you know.
They get as much time as they need.
They get as much time as they need. It's an untimed assessment. Some students will finish very quickly. Others will, may take a little bit more than the estimated time. But these are time estimates based on a pilot and a field test that has been administered across the United States. And so these are reasonable time estimates, we believe, but I don't want people to think, you were supposed to test a certain amount of time and you've gone over. Some students will, but others will go under. And that's why it's going to be real important that we maintain instruction in the rest of the building. So there is that flexibility of students returning to class. We will treat it at the high school just like we treat AP assessments. Students come out of their class, teachers are very aware and reasonable about the kind of makeup work that needs to be done. But we hope not to lose instructional time at the high school, and we see this as an instructional assessment anyway, and that we will learn a lot from it and about our students and about where we are in getting to the Connecticut core standards.
That's great. The other agenda item, which I actually had to leave a little early, I don't know if it was actually discussed, but it was in the packet, and there was some discussion about, the math sequencing and...
At Adams.
And at Baldwin, I believe. I mean, that may play into that at some point, based on the Borland report.
The report that you got was just for Adams, although it's going to be presented to 6th grade parents at Baldwin because they're
Right.
going to be going into
They're two different,
Adams.
they're two issues.
Yeah, there are...
But the specific update was
Right.
about
The
how,
specific update was the various options on addressing the sequencing at Adams.
for 6th
Correct.
graders as they move into 7th grade and how they
Correct.
will be placed in possible math placements.
But I
in
think
7th
one of the things that, at least myself and another board member brought up is that, it is important to address that it may not have budgetary implications, but that we feel it's important to look at one of the recommendations or the observations by Dr. Boland was that, I don't know the exact minutes, but it was on the order of 70 minutes a day.
It's
involved
one
in
that
to
the
music.
Bridges asks for 60 to 75 minutes of math instruction.
Yeah, he made a
and
number
math.
of recommendations around mathematics, some that had to do with sequencing of math programming, some that had to do with the acceleration of students through the math sequencing, and some that had to do with scheduling, particularly as it impacts math instruction at Baldwin. I see Mr. Hamill nodding in the back of the room. So the update on Saturday was only about one component around parent communication around the sequencing as it exists. What I can tell you is that we're working on all of those components, and we'll be coming with more information to you on direction and timing for those elements, those other elements
And the
that were
meeting
noted.
with Dr. Borland, what's the date on that? That's,
2 weeks from,
2 weeks from tonight?
There's one on the 23rd.
okay.
Yeah, and I also, I
where's
just
that
want...
going to be, where's that going to be, by the way?
It's
I'm
at
sorry.
Adams.
In the
We've
course-
moved it to the Choral Room at Adams.
Course.
It was originally scheduled for the Media Center at Cox. We didn't think that was the most conducive venue for the conversation. I do want to note, and I think it's going to be important for us to engage Dr. Borland around this, in a number of his recommendations, and I really applaud him and I really appreciate his report for this, but in a number of his recommendations, and particularly in the area of mathematics, he is careful to note that some of his recommendations are redundant, and in fact, some are essentially contradictory. So he is helping us to go through a process of brainstorming and thinking about how to be better. But I think we want to engage him in the conversation that his 32 recommendations don't make a laundry list that we can tick off. They in fact force us to an important conversation. We'll never be able to do all 32 of his recommendations because some are contradictory. And so I really enjoyed the report because of that. I think it will push us to do good thinking and planning, but I think it'll be important to sort of tease that out of our conversation when we meet with him in 2 weeks.
Okay. All right, anything else on that?
The building committee will be meeting here tomorrow evening. I'm sorry.
No, I was, anything else on the
I apologize.
curriculum committee? No? Okay. Building committee?
I thought you meant anything else under 10, I apologize. The building committee will be meeting tomorrow night. I'll be joining them tomorrow evening, and there has been some interest around the energy conversation that we've engaged in for your last 2 meetings. So I will be updating them on the energy numbers specific to Guilford High School next year, and apprising them of the action that you took here this evening around the energy numbers as well.
Okay. And still on track to open when we thought it was going to open?
We are on budget and on time, yes.
All right. Keep it that way.
Through very good management of the building committee.
No, look, the building committee is, I mean, tell you, they've done an outstanding job.
They have.
That is a committee that I will never serve on.
Yeah, that's a tough job.
No, that's a very hard job. But the good news is we probably won't be building a school in any of our service times in town, so. And I forgot to mention this, I do want to just publicly thank Ms. Trudeau for the work that she did in putting the budget together. This is a very intensive, we get it, it's a very intensive time of the year. You've got 9 people, just us, asking sometimes dissimilar questions, sometimes questions that may seem to you like very, very, very basic or maybe very complicated, but you've responded to all of the questions and all of the requests for information, at least facially cheerfully, if not actually cheerfully, but it really was a very good process this year, and I want to thank you for the work that you did on it. Public questions? Anybody, or any town committee liaisons?
Land Acquisition Committee met last week, its first meeting in the last 3 months, and no Board of Education business was discussed.
All right. All right, public questions? Anybody want to, any public? No? Okay. Then is there anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you all for your patience with the scheduling for the last 4 weeks.